So why don't we get started? It's 10 o'clock, top of the hour. So today we're back from our summer hiatus for the maturity model for Microsoft 365 practitioners calls. We appreciate you joining us. Today's guest star is Heather Severino. She's going to be helping us talk through the staff and training competency, which is one that's been in place for quite some time, but we haven't really dwelled on a call yet. So we're looking forward to getting some of Heather's thoughts and talking through what we have in place for our staff and training competency documentation. So our agenda for today, and did that switch slides for everybody?
Yes.
I never like to assume, because you know what that does for me. So our agenda for today is that we'll talk through a little bit and try and go relatively quickly. You know, what is the maturity model all about? As with most of these P&P initiated calls, we like to try to give some context for people who haven't joined us before. We'll talk through what's there for the maturity model in general, and then we'll dive into the sort of main event and talk about what's in place for our staffing and training competency. One thing that's important to note is we've changed our invitation for these calls, which may be why we have people trickling in a little bit late. That link will take you to a new calendar event that you can download, and it will add to your calendar for the next, I think, season, let's say. And if we have a new link, we'll certainly let you know. But that invitation is a new way to join. So please feel free to share that with your friends and family. Simon, do you want to talk a little bit about the model and what's there and
of course,
all that sort of fun stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, to sort of, for those who've not been on before, and to remind us what this is all about. So the purpose of the maturity model is to help organizations understand what is possible with the Microsoft 365, understand how they can get the most from Microsoft 365 by honing in their resources. You know, we've all got a finite amount of resources, whether it be time, money, or all of the above. So helping you kind of select the right approach based on what the benefits and impacts you're looking for in your business. It's aimed at users who are not just technologists, you know, they're business focused as well. So helping support that discussion with senior management as to say, you know, why would we want to improve our collaboration? Why would we want to improve our communication? So what we've done to enable that is create a set of competencies, which you can see on the right hand side. So, you know, as I mentioned, collaboration, communication, management of content, and what we're talking about today, staff and training. You know, creating those competencies and helping define the levels of maturity. So, you know, what does that level 100, where we're sort of very base level, through to level 500, where, you know, this is our panacea. At the moment, you know, I'd like to sort of pull out a couple of things which we're working on, the team are working on. So in progress, we've got competency around modern infrastructure, which I know Simon, Hudson, and Sharon are really busy working on. And then we've also got employee experience as well, with all the great stuff which is going on around with Viva. We have articles which support those competencies around the principles of a topic, and kind of a how-to, so how to elevate from one level to the next. We've got some supporting content on that as well. Can I get the next slide, please, Mark?
Sure, Simon.
Thank you. So, you know, this session is all about sharing, you know, all of our experiences with, you know, the maturity model for Microsoft 365, and we'd love people to get involved. There's a link there, aka.ms, sharing is caring, which allows you to kind of understand how, because this practitioners for maturity model initiative is part of the patterns and practices initiative, then, you know, how can you contribute, how can you get involved, socialize our content, present a case study. It'd be great to have someone talking about how they've used the maturity model within their business or with one of their customers. So there are the links to that. And the purpose of this maturity model is a safe space. So we want people to be able to ask those questions, which we all ask questions which you might think are silly, but they're probably not silly to others as well. It's good to share that. So it's a safe space for us to discuss how we use a maturity model and what works and what doesn't work. Right at the bottom there of the slide, there is a couple of links there on how to run a workshop to start to get started in your organization with the maturity model, and also all the prior recordings as well, which are all published on YouTube.
I think it's worth mentioning, Simon, if we have anybody who hasn't joined us before, sometimes we'll have people say, well, this would be great if you only had, and I think it's worth pointing out, this is open source. This is all part of, it was docs.microsoft.com, but it's actually over the weekend switched to learn.microsoft.com. So we've got a platform upon which we can publish this stuff, but it's really a joint effort. We have a core team that's working on it. But if you have thoughts, if you disagree with something, if you want to augment something that you see in an article, we would love that. This is something that we're all doing in our sort of spare time because we believe in it and love it. But we're looking for input from the community on any level that is useful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So how is the maturity model sort of organized? So we have a maturity model which starts at level 100, which starts at that default. Generally it's chaotic, it's not controlled, it's unstable, there's no design really gone into it. So that'd be our default state. And then we work through the various levels. I won't go into great detail, but level 200, we're starting to look at at the competency and go, well, what can we do to get better? How do we start to manage this competency? So again, taking that intent, we're going from that chaotic side, we're starting to kind of fight the fires, starting to put in some routine processes, and then as we get to level 300, where we've got those processes and they're defined and we're using them throughout the organization, we're having a much more designed capability around that competency. And from that sort of level 300, which you kind of see is that's the sort of the standard where we think a competency should be. We can then start taking advantage, putting in measurements around the processes or the things which are going on around that competency in level 400, and measuring things so that we can then make tweaks and changes to improve that competency based on real information, real data. So they're more quantitative, and then level 500 is then when we're using that information and starting to optimize those competencies, getting in feedback and making changes. Again, sort of trying A to B testing maybe on what is and what's not working within that competency. So that level 500 is the panacea, is the nirvana.
And very few people get to level 500, and nor should they try to, unless that is a strategic advantage, really, if you think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So this is taking the previous slide and putting some statements around it. So what's level 100 is just trying to keep the thing going, keep the lights on. Level 200. We need to now educate. We need to ensure people, know what they're doing. And then level 300, people do now know what they're doing, and we're defining a consistent way across the business. Level 400, we're adding, as I said before, measurement and analysing and taking actions to improve on that. And level 500, we want to ensure that we're always being effective, always doing the right thing. That nirvana, that top of the game, best of breed organization. And as Marc says, depending on what your business is doing, you will be wanting to have different levels depending on what you need to do. So if you're a regulated industry, you'll want to be improved. You want your governance and risk and compliance up at that higher level than maybe a one-man band or a small organization which isn't regulated, doesn't have those compliance needs. So it is it depends. And yeah, and this is another view on the model. So you can see here, you know, we're sort of applying it to, I guess, the age of an organisation, so or team as well. So we've got level 100, you know, startups and new teams, things. There's a things that are chaotic within that business or in that team, and then moving up to being more mature, which I like to think our organisation is getting that way. And then 300 being established, having those rules of the game in place, those policies and procedures, and then taking that on to, you know, what is it to be successful? You know, what can we do? How can we innovate in the organisation? And then 500 being that best of breed, as I mentioned previously. So, Marc, I'll hand back to you. That's okay.
Okay, sure. So today we're talking about staff and training, and you know, we have a list of future topics that we're hoping to get to. Maturity in an ever-changing world seems like something that we might like to tackle for the next practitioner session. If you have any ideas of something that you'd like us to go into more depth in, we'd love to hear that. So feel free to add that into the chat or raise your hand, and we'd be happy to hear your thoughts. So again, if you want to contribute, there are a couple of great sharing is caring sessions that would help you, be able to contribute to the articles and make what are called pull requests on GitHub. That can be a little bit intimidating, but there are some sharing is caring sessions that can help you get good at that. One is just for a first-time contributor. Another focuses on the community docs, which is where this set of content lives. There's another one for how do you write for the web, which is useful for any context, you know, anyone who's working on an intranet or using web pages to try to communicate. And then next month, we will talk about maturity in an ever-changing world, as I mentioned. So please look forward, hopefully, that you can join us for that. I'm going to skip the picture time because I don't have the equipment set up. This was from our May call, and I think Simon and I have talked enough, so we want to give Heather enough room to give her take on this staff and training model. So Heather, I'm going to pitch it over to you. Let us know who you are, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Marc. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Severino. If I've not met you before, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also an MVP for the Microsoft 365 apps and services, and I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor. So you're welcome to kind of check out all the courses I've got out there. My latest one is managing approvals in Microsoft Teams, which could be very appropriate for some of the things we're going to talk about today. So let me go ahead and switch over to my slides here real quick, and we'll get started.
Maybe I need to stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. All right, so you should be able to see my slide okay. It should be on the same slide. So based on what Simon and Marc were just talking about with the levels that we have, I'm going to kind of take you through those levels and talk about some of the things that I have been seeing or things that we should look out for. But I'd really like this to be a discussion. So you're welcome to kind of join in the chat or raise your hand if you want to add something to it. Everyone's thoughts on this are welcome because I know we're coming to this with many different experiences and maybe different levels that we're working at and what works best for everyone. So starting here with this level 100, which is that initial level, there's a lot that's happening here. And as it was mentioned, it can be really chaotic. And this is a time when there's going to be self-discovery going on. If we think about it from an end user's perspective, we've all probably been there. Let's put ourselves in their shoes. What are they experiencing? What's changed? I often find things like, I'll hear things such as, well, they've been working with Office for so many years. They know how to use Outlook. They know how to work in Word. They know how to do this. But it could be something that's new and different to them, like cloud documents, right? So if we just throw something at them and we're saying, okay, you know it, go use it. We don't really have the training to support it right now. Our help desk is more that break, fix, putting out the fires. what's going to happen? You know, one of the things that comes to mind for me is if they're not familiar with working in cloud documents, how do they know what should go on OneDrive? What should go in SharePoint? What should we be accessing from Teams? Or what's the difference between those documents that we have in SharePoint and Teams? Is there a difference, right? These are the kinds of things that our end users are experiencing. And then they're left to kind of fend for themselves, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? They're having that self-discovery, but it doesn't mean that you're getting the most efficient or productive ways to be able to work with that. You're not getting maybe the collaboration at a level that you want to have within that business unit or across those cross-functional business units or all up as an organization. So this level, there's a lot of self-discovery happening. There's a lot of peer-to-peer learning happening because as maybe an employee learns something, they're going to share it with their colleague, or if their colleague has a question about it, oh yeah, I just figured that out yesterday. Here's how I do it. But it may not necessarily also be the best way, the quickest way, or the way that we want them to do things based on maybe the processes that we're setting up that may not be documented quite yet, right? So those are the kinds of things that are happening. And as I mentioned here, I like to call it the scenic route versus the expressway. There's still stuff I'm learning today, especially in Excel and maybe even in PowerPoint, that I've been doing it this way all these years because I didn't know any better. I learned it myself. And now that I've figured out, oh, this is a much quicker way to do it, or this is a better practice to follow for getting that done. So those are the kinds of things that we have happening at this level. Anybody else want to share their thoughts on what you've experienced at a level 100?
I mean, this is sort of where everyone starts, right? It's like, here's a new tool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. That's sort of, you know, some organizations think that if you throw the tech at somebody, then all of a sudden miracles will occur. And
right.
It's not a good place to stay, right?
No. It's also where I find that if they are allowing for training, it's usually they're sending you to training. It's that they don't necessarily have maybe somebody on staff to provide the training. And I commonly hear things like, I'm here because my boss told me to be here. I've been voluntold to kind of be at this. So there's not really that engagement or excitement about what do I need to know? Why is this important to me? Or I'm here at this training because my boss said that I've been working with Excel for 3 years and I need to go into this intermediate level or this advanced level, when they don't have maybe the foundational stuff. They've been doing data entry, but they don't have that foundational knowledge. So we also want to make sure we're not kind of skipping or making assumptions on, I think they already know this because they've been working with it for years, or they should be at this level because they've been doing this for so many years, when they might not be. We got to kind of figure out where they're at with that.
So you're saying it's about giving them the why. Why is it that they're doing it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think why is really important. Some communications, you know, you may not have necessarily the budget to have that subject matter expert or that team of subject matter experts to provide that support and training, but at least some communications that kind of get their interest in knowing, like, here's what's changing, you know, when it's changing, what it means to you. So at least there's maybe some more curiosity and excitement around it. And then when you get to that point where you are offering the training in the office hours or whatever else you might be doing, there's more interest, right? There's more interest in signing up instead of it's mandatory type of training, or we want you to go to this, but they don't really know what the value is in it and they're not really excited about necessarily trying it out.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Accidental training. I love that phrase.
Say that again.
Accidental training. I love that.
Yes. Phrase. Yeah. and there's also accidental trainers like myself. Like, I kind of learned a lot of this on my own at first. And I feel like that makes a lot of trainers are like that too. And I think it makes us better trainers because we're coming at it from the approach of the end user of how did I figure it out? What worked for me, instead of maybe the formal learning.
One thing that I think we see is someone will be curious and then find something and then start showing it, like their presentation will have this new element or their spreadsheet will do something. And then the rest of us are like, and I realize this depends on culture too. If you've got a learn it all culture, we'll say, oh, that's cool. How did you do that? But if I don't want to show up like, oh, I didn't know that, I don't want to let them know, then you kind of, it inhibits the spread, so it's interesting that way.
Yeah. And if you're familiar with the customer immersion experiences, cloud immersion experiences that Microsoft has been having, those CIEs, that's a lot of what happens in those. And I love that approach because it's almost what they consider guided learning, where instead of you like telling them to go try this out or telling them the steps to follow, you're kind of guiding them to get them there and try it out, and then have that peer-to-peer or that team learning happening. And you're right, there's so much more excitement that can come from that when there's a discovery, and then they want to share it with the world because they realize how much of an impact that has on their job and those things that maybe everyone around them is also doing, and how that can be such a game changer for them. Totally agree. So that leads us to level 200. And here in level 200, there is some support. It's limited. The help desk is doing that break fix, as I mentioned before. They're putting out those fires. There could be long wait times to get support. And if that's the case, if that's what's happening and you're at level 200, what tends to happen is then you have your end users that are kind of going out there and trying to figure it out on their own. And what do we usually find is that they're on the internet doing web searches to find the information that they need. They're on video platforms, doing searches to try and find the information that they need. And while they may find a way to do it, it may not be the method or the process that you want them to be following. And it also could introduce competing products. And this is when I tend to think of things like Planner versus Asana versus, those other types of planning tools like Trello and those things that are out there where we may already have Planner as part of Microsoft 365. So why do we want those different business units going out there and purchasing subscriptions to other tools that have maybe similar or same capabilities when we already have something that's part of our subscription? So if you're at this level, the things to consider is, making sure that you have those communications that let them know maybe about all these tools. If the training's not available yet, at least there's some awareness. Have those, have a SME or a small group of SMEs that they can come to for more of that. I need to do this, what is available to me, or here's what I'm trying to do strategically over the next 5 years or whatever it is. And they can kind of try and help guide them as to what tool is going to work best for that or what is available to kind of give them that insight with that. This is also a great time for you to start thinking about who are your early adopters? Like, who are you finding from that level 100 that are the ones that are excited, that are the ones that are doing that self-discovery and really wanting to kind of share it with the world, shouting it out to everybody who wants to kind of know about that stuff? Those are the ones that are your early adopters that become great champions. So if you have an early adopters program, if you have a champions program, those are the ones you want to invite to that. And this is a good time for you to start forming that and kind of managing those programs and getting those things set up to help them with that. Any real world stories that you'd like to share from your experiences when you're working in this managed level 200? Or real world stories of where there's those competing tools out there that maybe other people have discovered and brought into the organization, not knowing what they already had available?
Yeah, we find a lot with cloud storage that people are using Dropbox or as well, and they don't realize they've got OneDrive. That's a sort of a common one, and they've got their own login. But yeah, that's a common one. Mike, sorry, I talked over you.
Heather, is there is a champions or early adopters program a hallmark of level 200, or are they kind of orthogonal? They don't really relate. Like, would you expect the 200 to have one?
Sorry, you could really start that at any point. I just feel like when you're starting to get to this where you have a support person and there is some guidance, then it kind of makes more sense that maybe that person would be the person that is the owner, if so to say, or maybe the program manager for your champions group. I mean, it's something that could start organically at a level 100. This or a higher level is where I would find that you're more likely going to start forming that and managing that. Your thoughts on it? Do you have anything else or different thoughts on it?
It feels to me like it's a signifier of a higher level of maturity, especially if it's organized and it's funded. That to me feels like a more mature organization. But I was just curious if maybe 200 is the inflection point, right, where it starts to show up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's like we might have some inklings there. It may not necessarily be formal or called out as something that's named or something that meets on a regular basis, but we're starting to see something shaping there, or who has an interest in that.
Sam, I think you bring up an interesting point. You're furiously trying to shrink your software stack, lots of duplicative tools. That's something, from a training perspective, the training sort of spreads, it oozes out all over the place, right? We're using 12 tools for task management. And I think level 200 or 300 from this perspective is where you're starting to rationalize that from an education and training perspective, right? Well, if we narrow the number of tools, we can actually get people better at using them, and then they can support each other, and that could be the germ for the champions or early adopters program right there.
Yeah.
Also, think about, you end up having duplicate, lots of user accounts and the security implications as well, aren't there? So as well as, money saving, there's also, that security aspect as well, and ease of use too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so as we move into level 300, this is where we really start to define everything. So kind of back to the question of when do we kind of see that champions program shaping? Well, this is really where we would start to define that, if that is something that the organization is mature enough to stand that up. This is also a great opportunity for you to kind of define those roles and responsibilities. So, who is the person that is managing an early adopters program, or who is the person that is managing your champions? Who is the SME, the subject matter expert that we go to when there's a question around this technology? Do we have a trainer on staff that we can go to for questions, or that we can get some training scheduled with? It's also when we start to see that we have that ongoing support. So once we have those roles and responsibilities defined, then we can kind of have that support set up as far as how quickly are we supporting this? Who do they reach out to? When can they reach out? What are the expectations or options that are available for the resources that we have for that? I think this is also a good opportunity to think through that just-in-time training. So, when we first launch something, if we don't provide any training, or if there's a delay in that training, you're losing a lot of productivity, you're losing a lot of efficiencies, security, as it was just mentioned. There's a lot that can go into that if they don't have the proper knowledge that they need for that. So really kind of defining, what are we offering from a training perspective? Are we offering just in time as we're rolling that technology out, so that they have the knowledge just prior to or right at the start of getting that technology? Are we going to continue to grow that knowledge? And that's when we get into the higher levels that we'll kind of see how we are continuing this more as a program than a project. We'll see that in the next level that we have. But this is, we've got a training plan and a program. We've got funding for it. We've got funding for the SMEs. We've got funding for, whatever it is that we need to kind of really define this and make this more of a formal process and a formal program. We want to start thinking about this as more of a program than just a start to finish project and we're done, as we might when we're in that level 100. We've installed the software, we rolled it out, you're on your own, right? Like, we're done with the project. We want to start thinking through of, this is a living, ongoing program that has a lot of things that we need to consider to make sure that happens. The training that's happening at this level, or when we start to get to this level, is specific for those technologies. So it's also good to think about, what does that person need training on? What do they work with in that job role? What does that business unit use? How does that business unit communicate and collaborate with this other business unit? Maybe it's legal and HR, maybe it's finance and IT. What things make sense for us to include in that training so that we're getting the most out of it? And then, of course, all up as an organization, how can we make sure that we're secure, we're effective, we're productive across the organization? Sorry, I went a little too fast here. Go ahead.
So you had accidental training at level 100. You've got just-in-time training at level 300. I'd be interested in your perspective on, historically, in the old days, gray hair, courses were all offered in person. You had to be in the room. You had to, it's happening now, so you got to go now. And we would put people through training, whether or not it made sense, because we had to fill those chairs up because it was expensive to run the training.
Right.
How do you feel like that's evolved? I mean, we've got different delivery mechanisms, obviously, but as you're going up the maturity level, how does the thinking about how to deliver training, like what frequency and to whom, how does that change?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think in recent events too, we've also had some changes and thoughts on that as well. So more virtual. It seems like we are, of course, switching more virtual, especially since we've had the pandemic. Everything has switched more to virtual. I haven't had any in-person training since the pandemic, other than what I do at my college once that became live again. So that's been a big switch in that. I think it also depends on the learners and the culture of the organization as to what's going to work best for everyone and the topics that they're learning, right? So if you can, bring in a cross section of those business units if you're wanting to kind of drive collaboration and kind of show them how Teams and SharePoint might be able to help you quite a bit, right? Then that would be a great opportunity to focus on that with the people from those different business units together. So it's a combination of the people and the product, the technology that you have as to what's going to work best. I think length is also an important one, right? We used to always have like a full day of training, and now it might be something where it's a 1 hour training just to get the fundamentals or the things that are essential for their job or for their work so that they feel confident in what they're doing. It might just be a 1 hour session that we have on Teams, and maybe a 1 hour session that we have on or cloud documents, whatever makes sense for that, instead of the longer. So shorter is what I'm finding is being more common, and virtual, or the option for maybe a hybrid, whether they want to be virtual or they want to be in person, if that's something that the organization wants to support. For the initial, I really still think that live training within an organization, when you're rolling something like this out, can definitely give them an opportunity to ask questions, to know that they are amongst their peers, where they may get more out of it that way. And then, of course, if it's recorded, they can go back, or if they missed it, it's available to them. The on-demand, though, is great for that continual, or for the person that maybe works completely remote and doesn't really have a team that they're working with, and they just need to kind of get that one specific thing answered that they've been trying to figure out. Then recorded on-demand type learning might be the way to go as well. I do think from a long-term, keeping that knowledge growing as it needs to, having things like on-demand learning libraries and kind of incorporating that into Viva, those types of things can be really essential as well. Hope that answered your question, Mark.
It did. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I think it's an important point, isn't it? An important point there, about having, if you do have those sessions scheduled, at least it gives people permission to actually, they've got time dedicated to go and do the training. Sometimes we all get busy and we don't find the time to do as much training as we would like. So yeah, getting permission to do that, being given permission to do that is important.
Yeah, and I always like to look at it as, as the trainer, I shouldn't be the only person that's bringing knowledge to the training. There's so much knowledge within that organization that I may not know if I don't work for that organization, right? That everybody that's there, that peer-to-peer sharing and learning that can happen, I like to foster that. I like to kind of think of myself as that guide on the side, where I'm going in and I'm not going to be that professor that's doing that, the sage on the stage where I'm just going to tell it to you. I want you to have those discovery moments. I want you to have those discovery moments with your peer and get that excitement. I think that there's a lot to that you're going to get so much more out of it. And there might be things that you didn't know that your peers know, like, oh yeah, we use this for this, or this is how we do this. And yeah, there's so much that can come out of that than when you're just heads down working at your desk every day and maybe not talking to your peers about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
You're the Obi-Wan, the guide.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So when we move on to, well, I have a question here for everybody as we're moving from 300 to 400. So I always wonder, like, how do you know when it's time to move from this level 300, where you have a SME that's providing that strategic guidance, and then you get to more of that level 400, which we're going to next, which is where you have more than one SME offering guidance. You have a larger group, right? There's more happening here. And so when we get to this one, this is where I was mentioning earlier, we should be thinking about this more as a program than a project. We're done. We're at the dead end of this. We're done with this project. Okay, now we're going to start working on the next project, right? And I think traditionally for many years in IT, that may be how we looked at things, like, okay, we're done rolling out that technology. Okay, so let's start testing and planning for this next thing. And as much as everything is changing, especially with us now having all of our software in the cloud, we have to even look at it more like this of there's always going to be new features, there's always going to be things changing, there's always going to be new applications and tools being introduced, right? So it's not just a one-off training. And for the overall knowledge and the growth of the organization, we need to be looking at it that way. We need to be looking at training as something continual, and we're fostering that knowledge sharing and building and self-discovery so that we can get to this level 400. And this is where we're saying, like, okay, we want to have things that are predictable. We want to know kind of what's happening. We want them to know what we're measuring, what our goals are. We hitting those goals and being able to share those with metrics that we have for that, and making sure that, we have things formally in place for when those changes are happening. So a change advisory board, maybe an emergency change advisory board if one's not already in place, to kind of manage and track all of those things. So it should not be one-off training. We should be continually training the staff to make sure that the knowledge sharing is happening there. And this is a great opportunity, this level, more so maybe even the next level. I know we talk about level 500, we may not get there to that optimizing. So it could be in here, it could even be earlier if you're ready to introduce it. Office hours. I'm a big supporter of having some kind of I want to just check in, I want to share the latest stuff, or my team wants to share the latest stuff with all of our end users on these new features that are coming out. And I also want to give them an opportunity to come with the questions that they have about it, right? So when you start rolling something out, that's when you tend to have like these office hours happening, because you've got people that have questions. They go to a little training session, a week or two, they might have questions. So why not offer something where you can say, hey, I'm going to show you these 2 or 3 features you may not have known about, but this is also a great time that if you have questions and you're stumped on using @mentions in Teams or something like that, you can come ask your question and we'll provide an answer and show you how to do that. But those office hours sometimes fall off. They only start happening at the beginning, but this is a great opportunity, whether it's once a month, every 2 weeks, whatever cadence makes sense within your organization, to host just maybe 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever makes sense with you. Come on in, this is my office hour, come on in, ask your question, learn a few new things. You might even learn some things from your peers as they're sharing what they've discovered and what they're excited about. And then you go back off to your work and do your thing and know that you have that other opportunity to come back for office hours. And same thing for training. Maybe you offer a live session once a month on a very specific topic, or you offer a way for all of your staff to be able to vote on those topics so that they have an opportunity to kind of choose what they want to learn about next. So those are the kinds of things that you should have in your competency at this level 400, but making sure that it's also predictable. We've got some ways to kind of measure what's going on, what the impact is within the organization. We're meeting those goals or exceeding those goals, and that'll help you kind of determine how you want to handle the next iteration of whatever technology you're introducing. So what are your thoughts? Do any of you have office hours? Do you offer continual learning in a way like this? Are you tracking the changes you're making and tracking the metrics to see if you're hitting those goals?
The organizations that I've seen be the most successful are the ones that offer, I think of it as a consultative service. It's office hours, it's walk up to the desk hours, depending on how your company is structured, but being able to go and discuss something with someone else who knows a bit more than you do is, and having that person not say, what's your budget code, or well, we'll have to plan for that next year. That doesn't help. It's having some people dedicated to offer that kind of support. It's not help desk, because it's more discussion. It's not problem resolution. It's I'm thinking about doing this. How might I go about this? And so to me, that is something I encourage every client we ever work with. And some of them get further along on that, and some get less along on that. Depends on the structure. I did have one question for you that maybe you said it, but why do we need a taxi? What's a cab?
A change advisory board.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
You might have said that. I didn't. If I didn't.
Yeah,
hear
you have
it,
change advisory board, and then ECAB, which would be like your emergency change advisory board. And this can be as formal or informal as you want it to be. If you have a process for submitting a change and getting it approved, a discussion amongst that board for any of the changes that are coming up, or how they went and what would you do differently with that.
So, it's interesting, again, in this competency, we've seen it in quite a few of the others where at the sort of level 100 to 300, it's more about process. And then when you get to 400, it's right, how do I embed this into the culture of the business? And that's what you're saying there, isn't it? It's not just a one-off thing, it's how we continually do it. So, yeah, I mean, we've been doing something in our organization where Friday afternoon for is like learn time. So, and we're working on ways of measuring that. We're using like Microsoft Learn XP as a way, and as one, but also getting people to create blog contents and push stuff out on the internet, and that's another way of measuring as well. So that's how we're doing it. Giving people permission. We want you to learn, instilling that learning in an organization. It's how you do that. It's
and I think another interesting concept too is, if those different business units have their own teams set up, what's to say there's not even just a little channel in there for their training or for whatever it is that they can ask each other, that peer-to-peer learning, have a little space that can be informal just for the group that needs to have that chat back and forth. It doesn't necessarily have to be something formal that's being offered by a separate business unit. You know what I mean? Like it can be as informal or formal as you want it to be.
I think Mike was just first, and then Pam afterwards, but you had a question.
There were two things that we did with office hours. So I was the product owner for the intranet for a large global company, and we wanted to have consistency so that people knew that I could always count on the hour of 9 a.m. Eastern time on Fridays, et cetera, which is great. But then the other factor is our audience in Japan, that was 7 o'clock Friday night for them. So like having enough variety that you capture people in Central European time zone, US East Coast time zone, West, whatever your time zones are that you're covering, right. But also within those constraints, being as consistent as you can so that people know it's always there. Yeah.
Totally agree.
And record them and post them. Because I think the asynchronous consumption is really important. If we do it every Friday at 10 and somebody has a standing meeting every Friday at 10, they can't ever get to it unless they can get to it asynchronously.
Yep. Yeah, I think thinking about how do you scale anything in all of this is often not at level 100 or 200. People don't think that through. Well, we're going to have a stand-up class every Monday. Well, that doesn't scale if you've got offices around the world or you've got lots of people starting. So at this level, you're thinking about that portfolio of ways that people can learn as opposed to just a single way. So you're hitting different learning styles, you're scaling, you're giving people just-in-time learning, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, Mark, in those earlier stages, you probably don't have the funding for it too, right? So when you get more to this level, you have leadership backing you, so you've got some stakeholders in it, and you've got hopefully a nice budget to be able to help you with whatever you need for that as well.
I think Pam's got her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was trying not to be antisocial and go off camera, but I can't do that. Just a little side note. It's not letting me. But what Mike was saying about the different time zones holds true at my organization too. I'm at Microsoft actually, and there's a monthly. The name has changed over the years from champions to user group, but just within our own organization, right? Of people who are running the different divisional portals or their initiative areas on the intranet and internally, and they meet and it's an opportunity for the services team and IT to show what's coming. And just because we happen to be at Microsoft, it's also a great place for the product group to get a little feedback. But it also then is delivered twice for time zones, and there's a team channel associated with it. It's out of a team channel, so you can have this asynchronous conversation happening in between as well. I actually another question for you, Heather, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm interested in when you see the idea of using the adoption score in the admin center and watching that and knowing like how, thinking about that as something as a part of this program, when you would kind of see that coming in and where there's a sense of maturity-wise, if there's a particular group or organization that's best suited for that, or if it just probably varies depending on the company. But I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
I wish I had some thoughts on that. I haven't done much with that score, so I think I'll open that up to Marc, Simon, and the rest of the group to see if they have had any interaction with that and what their thoughts are.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I guess, from sort of the guidelines of how we think that's a sort of a measurement. So I think it would be, sort of 400, but I could certainly see an argument of it being introduced at 300 because, it's really going to give you a lot of insight of what's going on. But yeah, I have not done too much with it either. It's a productivity score before, wasn't it? So yeah.
Yeah. I would almost think that maybe that would be more, maybe at this point, you might start looking at that at level 400 of everybody's been using this, depending on how long they've been working in Microsoft 365, right? To be able to look at that score, or looking at it over time and saying, okay, what were we doing at these points? And are these milestones that can help us determine how that score has gone up? And then based on that, what we might want to plan for the future. That's a potential thought. But again, I'm just making some assumptions because I haven't really worked with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's there. It's not something that you've got to like put in place, or it's there as part of the product. And so it's, of course, being at Microsoft, wanting to make sure people are leveraging that at the right time is something that's on my mind of when's the right way to help people to on-ramp to it, basically.
Right.
This is definitely something we can add into the resources for this competency, though, if it's not there already, and I don't think it is.
Sounds like it could be a potential future topic too, Marc.
Yeah.
Also, as well, bringing this into the how to elevate, content as well, because we've got one, haven't we, for staff and training. There's a number of things which have, a number of tips there. The one about level 100, 200. The people who are involved in level 100. Introducing them into an early adoption scheme, making them the champions, and it's a great tip. So yeah.
Yeah, I think your point's a good one, Mike. Even knowing that you want to measure things and what you want to measure is an indicator of more maturity, right? I mean, at level 100, you're not measuring anything. You're just trying to stomp out the fires. And it gets, that's why at level 400, when we start to talk about predictability, it's predictable because you're measuring things and you know what's happening, and you're making decisions based on the changes in those metrics. That's exactly level 100, Pam. It's 10:47, Heather, just for this time check.
Sure, yeah. I'll just take us to level 500. I know we mentioned at the beginning of this session that some organizations don't get here, and that's okay. It all depends on your organization and what works best for what you're working on and how you're working together. This level is where we start to create those best practices. So, through discovering what works for everybody, what processes work well for each person or business unit, we can create some best practices. And this is the level that you would be at. It's also where you're fostering that creativity with your workforce. So you're giving them the freedom to kind of think outside the box, right? To kind of ideate together, to get creative and start thinking about how can we maybe innovate better? How might we do something different than what we were doing before? Because now we've got these tools here that we can do that. Or how can I leverage this to be more productive with my team, or to make a space that gives us a better place for us to whiteboard together and come up with a solution for something. So this is the point where things become autonomous. We've got that really well-oiled machine. We've kind of gotten it to this point. We've got all of our reporting in place. We've got all of our training in place. We've got a support system in place, where they know where they can go and ask those questions and get the help that they need, that it starts to just kind of run on its own, as far as when we're saying autonomous. And we have that continual improvement that's happening too, based on the metrics that we have and the goals that we're continually setting and maybe changing to go forward. So I'd love to know if any of you have gotten here. And then if you have, how does this level affect when you're ready to introduce that next technology? Do you start at 100, or does that affect maybe you not starting at 100 that you're able to go to 200 or do things a little differently than we've kind of scoped them out here. So what are your thoughts on level 500? Are any of you there? Are you right now achieving to get there? Have you worked with an organization that is there? Like, what's worked well?
This is, I mean, at this level, you're the ultimate learning organization, right? It's organic, it's encouraged, it's cultural, it's budgeted, it's all the goodness. And I would say that it's probably a pretty unusual organization, right? I mean, we always sort of say, well, you know, if you're NASA, you have to make sure that you're doing everything exactly right because lives are in the balance. Getting to level 500 is, you know, not lives in the balance on staff and training, but you know, it's core to who you are. And I think, you know, if you think about the distribution curve of people, of organizations at different levels, it's always going to be a pretty low number that get to this level. And that's okay, right? Again, each organization should decide how important is staff and training to their strategic mission, and you know, what resources and dedication should they give it. I mean, everybody wants people to be competent, but it's very different running, for instance, and so thinking of some of my experience, you know, a call center versus a group of scientists. It's just a different, you know, the complexion of the organization makes a big difference here.
There's not a one size fits all is what it sounds like to me, right? Yeah, when you're saying working with data scientists, that's a different culture and that's a different way that they're working than a call center would be.
Not that there's anything better or worse for either of those examples. It's just that you have to mold your goals for the populations you're working for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess sometimes, you know, maybe some of those, you know, those high-end scientists who are, you know, pushing on the boundaries of, you know, of what we know, they, you know, there isn't that course on out there as well, but it's having that time for them to do that learning, I guess, and that research. I think, you know, Microsoft partners and you know, some of the technology companies, they're probably the ones where this would make most sense, you know, because, you know, having the staff and team is core to their business, and being able to push forward, that's going to help the business, you know, earn more money, you know, and come up with new innovative ways and products. So yeah, I think you know, we're doing a little bit of this. I would never say we're level 500. We're not, because we haven't got things around the level 300 which you talk about. But we definitely want the learning process to be more autonomous, and we want people to have the freedom to be able to go and learn. So that's something which, you know, aspects of this we're trying to do.
Yeah, and with you know, the current situation, at least here in the United States, with having, you know, maybe staff shortages, we don't have as much staff. If we're able to get to this higher competency, we might be able to do that with less staff. You know, we of course still need support, but if there are any, you know, budget restraints or things like that, we're able to still have that improvement and maybe continue on because we have this more formal training program in place.
Yeah, and also attracting talent and being able to retain talent as well is, you know, depending on your, you know, your sort of your profile, but you know, a lot of people we work with, that's what they love learning stuff. I mean, I know that I love learning stuff, so having that as a primary factor is great, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that's the end of what I have, Mark. I know we had that question. I don't know if we want to cover the question that was in the next slide, but I'll leave that to you.
Let me get back into presenting mode here.
Sure.
Let's see if I can take over. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Technology ain't it grand. I did click the button, and it did say it was going to do it. Trying again. Okay. So I'm going to hop back to where Heather was, and obviously all of these slides will be available to you, and there's a link in the last slide. So Pam, this was a question you had asked me when we were talking last week, and I wanted to make sure we addressed it, right? So Microsoft Learn is a tremendous resource for a lot of information about the whole platform. So it ought very well to be a part of the sort of the complexion of training that or training materials that you use. Any additional thoughts you wanted to add to that, Pam? Putting you on the spot.
That's okay. My name's on the slide and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, with MS Learn, and that's especially the more higher tech configuration approach, and then the other more day-to-day end user training that's now coming through Viva Learning. Both of them come through Viva Learning. Yeah. Like, just how does that fit in to this, and because again the idea of and of course I have a huge bias here, right? Because like I want to get this stuff out there so people can start using it right away, like right at when you're stomping out fires, that you can like be looking at Viva Learning. There's no reason to me to wait until like, oh, I can't look at this until I'm at level 300. It may not be as thoughtful or planful, which is fine.
Mark, if I can, I agree, Pam, with what you're saying. Like for the end user, they can go in and based on the role that they have, like let's say that they are a functional consultant or a data scientist or a developer or whatever it might be, that they can go in there and set that role and then set the technology that they need help with. Like maybe it's Azure, maybe it's Dynamics, and then they can say what level they're at. Are they beginner? Are they intermediate? Are they advanced? And it will suggest a learning path and a journey for them to take them through some learning that they may not have known about otherwise, right? If they're just searching by topic or something else. So I love Learn for that reason, and Viva with it being built in right to maybe where they're working within teams. So I think there's great opportunities there for hands-on training, for documentation, for prepping for certifications if you're going to get certified. And then when you need to renew that certification, you do it right through Learn as well. You don't have to sit and go into an exam center or do that exam from home. You get to renew it once a year right from there. So an all-in-one great resource.
Yeah, I wonder if the maturity aspect is whether it's kind of people discovering it on their own, stumbling across it, or sharing it organically like we talked about, versus it becoming kind of baked into the competencies like you're talking about, like, oh, hey, sales enablement, here's the Dynamics learning path to go down or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many organizations I work with who don't even realize that there's help on a page. When you're in Microsoft 365. So that's, level 100 is, we haven't told you about anything. And there's in product help, there's Microsoft Learn, there are all these resources out there. And lots of times even the people who are rolling out the software don't know that exists.
No.
Yeah, sorry. So I do think it's a maturity level thing, right? Making sure that you know about the resources that are available, and it's not just Google. I'm sorry, Bing. So we're almost out of time. I did want to point out we have these 5 slides in here, which I am not going to go through, but they take what's in the articles for this particular competency and turn them into slideware, so that if you needed to have a discussion within your organization, these slides could be handy. So they capture the current state of the competency article for this particular competency. If you have any questions or comments on those, of course, we'd love to hear them. This is a set of resources that I think, Heather, you may have added at least 1 or 2 of these, and a couple point to the competency article in the where it says Microsoft Docs. It's now Microsoft Learn. We copied the link last week, so I just want to make sure you knew those were in the slide deck. We've had a pretty decent Q&A as we've been going along, and we're almost out of time, so I'm going to skip that slide for right this second. And just want to say thank you for attending. Thank you, Heather, for giving us your thoughts. This has been a great discussion. Even though the audience was not huge, it doesn't always matter.
Thank you.
I think-
Thanks for
I think
having
we've-
me. It's been great
we've
talking to
covered
everyone.
some-
And Pam, I had some Microsoft Learn swag for you. I know you work for Microsoft, but I'm still happy to send it if you want it for asking that question.
I would share it with the next person who asks the question, or to maybe someone who is in the
Okay.
chat. I appreciate it, but
Perfect.
for someone else to have it.
Okay.
So, these links are all how you can get to content from, for example, your earlier meetings or additional slide decks and things like that. Again, join us on October 18th, where we're going to be talking about maturity in an ever-changing world. Thanks again, Heather. And thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.